Hey, Jaxon here. I don't have an intro plan, let's just get on to the video. About 3 months ago, I talked about SpongeBob SquarePants, Legend of the Lost Spatula, the first SpongeBob game ever made, and came to the conclusion that it was bad. Very, very bad. The controls and level design were terrible, the game was super cryptic and didn't tell you what any of your objectives were, and it also had some very annoying screen crunch. It completely missed the mark, even by licensed kids game standards. However, while it was the first SpongeBob game ever made, it wouldn't be the only one for long, as later that year, we got 2 more SpongeBob games, Operation Krabby Patty, a minigame collection for the PC, and the subject of today's video, SpongeBob SquarePants SuperSponge. Another 2D platformer, just like Legend of the Lost Spatula. It was released on September 20th, 2001 for both the PS1 and the Game Boy Advance to a resounding I've tried out SuperSponge a few times over the years. I thought it was solid, but was never able to finish it. That's gonna change today though. I'm gonna sit down and finally beat it. Because I have nothing better to do. SuperSponge has a very basic premise. It's Patrick's birthday, and SpongeBob wants to get autographs of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy as a present for him. SpongeBob visits the two at Shady Shoals and asks for their autographs, but they want nothing to do with him, and decide to send him on a bunch of random errands to get rid of him, promising that if he does all of them, that they might give SpongeBob the autographs. The gameplay of SuperSponge is split between 5 chapters, each consisting of 4 levels. The goal of each level is to get from point A to B to get one of the items Mermaid and Barnacle Boy have asked for. The items are usually found at the end of a stage completely unguarded, but the 4th level in each chapter has them guarded by a boss that you need to defeat. SpongeBob has a very basic moveset. He can run, jump, and do a ground pound. However, there are a handful of power-ups the player needs to use that shake up the gameplay. Chapter 1 introduces us to the first power-up in the game, the jellyfish net. It holds up to 5 jellyfish at a time and can launch them towards enemies as a short-range projectile. Despite the short range, I found it to be pretty useful for attacking enemies too high up for my ground pound to reach. The first chapter, SuperSponge, takes place in Jellyfish Fields, Sandy's Tree Dome, Fishhooks Park, and downtown Bikini Bottom. The first 3 are solid, but downtown Bikini Bottom sucks. There are way too many enemies and hazards crammed into the level. Thankfully, SuperSponge has a health system similar to Sonic. The player collects golden spatulas that scatter all over the place if you get hit, and if you have at least one, you should be safe from most hazards. So I just damage boosted my way through the level. Getting past all the enemies takes us to the first boss in the game, Mother Jellyfish. The fight has SpongeBob use his jellyfish net to hurt her, because according to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, Mother Jellyfish has a fear of jellyfish. Yeah, that sure makes sense. Chapter 2 has SpongeBob go inside an underwater volcano, where we're introduced to 3 more power-ups, a reef blower, balloons, and bubbles. The reef blower allows SpongeBob to suck up certain objects and shoot them back out either straight forward or diagonally. The balloons give SpongeBob a higher jump and the ability to glide down from one. And the bubbles create platforms for SpongeBob to stand on. These benefits all come at a price though. The reef blower is super heavy and as a result makes SpongeBob harder to control and takes away his ground pound. The balloons last only a limited amount of time, and the bubbles pop if SpongeBob stands on them too long, as well as using ammo similar to the jellyfish net. I didn't like these ones very much. They aren't terrible, but I only really used them in sections where they were absolutely required. The levels in Chapter 2 are pretty solid. There was this one section with Gary that took me more tries than it should have, but besides that, I found it to be pretty enjoyable. The boss fight is a different story. This chapter has us fight against the Subshark, a rogue creation of Plankton's. The fight has us use a brand new power-up, a gun that can shoot jellyfish. However, unlike the jellyfish net, which uses actual jellyfish, the gun uses these ammo tanks. There's only one in the boss area, and it doesn't respawn as far as I'm aware. So if you get a little trigger happy, you're screwed. Following the fight against the Subshark, SpongeBob goes to the Chum Bucket and borrows Plankton's secret time machine and goes back to prehistoric Bikini Bottom for his next task. It's not even the weirdest thing that happens in the game. Chapter 3 introduces karate gear and squeaky boots to the game. The karate gear is used to do a karate chop on enemies, and the squeaky boots do absolutely nothing as far as I'm aware. Just like in the show! While the squeaky boots don't do anything, I found SpongeBob's karate gear to be useful when I just wanted to book it to the end of the level without stopping to fight enemies. Too bad it's only a temporary power-up. Same with the squeaky boots. The boss fight for Chapter 3 has SpongeBob get swallowed by a giant whale, where he then has to fight a parasitic worm inside of it. It's not even the weirdest thing that happens in the game. Much like Mother Jellyfish, this boss kept heading out of my view, so I just kept bouncing on this tire and waited for it to show up again. Just ground pound on it enough times and you're golden. Chapter 4 has SpongeBob return to the present and go to rock bottom. There isn't a whole lot to say about this chapter since it doesn't introduce any new power-ups, it's just a bit harder than the game's been so far. The boss fight for this area is the Flying Dutchman. We have the jellyfish gun, and we have to shoot at him whenever he appears and tries to attack us. I think the Dutchman attacks the player a little too quickly after he shows up, but I found it to be a solid boss otherwise. That leaves us with one more chapter to cover, this one taking place in Bikini Bottom's industrial zone. It offers a pretty decent challenge and is a solid end to the game. One thing that I think is really funny about this area though is that Man Ray appears here, not as the final boss, but as one of the enemies that you come across. So there's just a bunch of Man Rays walking around the levels, and I found that to be funny. However, while the industrial levels are a good end to the game, the final boss is not. It's against the Iron Dogfish, a cyborg dog that lives underwater. Okay, now that's the weirdest thing in the game. This boss fight is piss easy. All you have to do is stand on these buttons to release some steam on the dogfish and then ground pound it while it's stunned. What an underwhelming way to end the game. Having completed so many tasks for them, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy finally give SpongeBob their autographs and come to the conclusion that maybe he's not that bad after all. He breaks their TV a few moments later. With that, SpongeBob and friends celebrate Patrick's birthday, ending SpongeBob SquarePants SuperSponge. It has its flaws, but I enjoyed it and think it's a massive step up from Legend of the Lost Spatula. If you're looking for a decent 2D platformer and have 90 minutes to kill, I think you'd enjoy it. You know, this has made me a little curious about the making of the game. I'm gonna go on the cutting room floor to see if there's anything interesting. I need to bleach my eyes out now.